tired. So starting in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. 20-second delay on. Disconnect, reconnecting. Yeah, hey, whatever. Well, alright, this is gonna have to be disconnecting. Reconnection successful. Yeah, I mean, people make a lot of money by well, it's kind of like any other corporate position. For years they've talked about how much money the average American is making for a company. Like profits up, like the less they pay you, the more they work you, the more money you make for them. So people are barely surviving. They don't know all the other things that your donations have gone for. Why linking back to accounts, just massive identity fraud and other fraud online. Just mostly we take pictures and show what we have. Like, we got this, I got this. Sleep on my couch again. Well, not my couch. It's like you ever play that Fallout game? Fallout. If you're a gamers community, the Columbia Infinity, the Comstock, the flying Confederate city. It comes to wage war for slavery and stuff. Well, I mean, there's that whole motif on there where you saw this. We can only identify as slaves. They're just in manual labor positions. One of the functions of the character is like, I don't know, you aid and free them from their manual labor. There's a test. There's a test when you first arrive there, and you're like, oh, it's kind of a forced storyline. The storyline is going to be what it is. But the whole premise, the detective, he goes on a search. I forget what he's searching for, his own daughter, or anyway, he's alcoholic, just drinking, kind of like me. And he goes to the in there at the carnival, and they had that as a punishment. They're going to throw apples at a woman who is sleeping with a slave, and I'll tell you, spoiler alert, it's a white woman and a black man, and all the crowd's getting ready to throw apples at them because of the situation. And I was like, and so you have a chance. You throw it at the guy who's like, step right up and throw you sir throw. So you give an apple, everybody's watching you, and it's like, will you throw the apple at the couple? Because everybody's like, that's the whole thing, to throw the apple at the couple because they're race mixing or something, or you can throw it at the guy who's like doing the announcement. Come on, $1, 1 ticket. You can throw an apple at the prisoners. I think I would like to get the statistics on that. Like how many people threw it at the racist white guy who is there at the announcer thing, or threw it at the couple. Because I had my heart broken. I was a little biased in the situation. Otherwise, I would be like, well, what's going on in this? But that's American history. So I'm just gonna get back to where I was happy about over a month ago. I was just getting angry, but when I finally figured out there's nothing to do but drink. Really, there's nothing else to do in my own existence here. That's the reason we work so hard. So I'm gonna do a reading on. I think Instagram has like a series. This is a public domain book. it's public domain, so I'm gonna be doing my thing. Oh yeah, the motif. It's one of those video games where it's just exploring. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful exploration game. Should I stream on Facebook or Instagram? Oh, I'm off camera, aren't I? Yeah, that's fine. That OBS will be reconnecting all day. Is it safe online? Sure. Is it safe outside? Sure. Is it safe to walk around showing how much more you have than other people or starving people? It was the John Edwards 2008 campaign. We went where did we go? We went to not Oak Park. Maybe it was. It had a really rough reputation amongst the city. It was one of those places that it was known for salacious news, shootings, and those types of things. Well, we went door to door, and I didn't know what to expect because it was a it's just one of those spots on the map that it seemed it was always been a dangerous neighborhood, and we were going to campaign because it was George Bush's term limits were up, or his 8-year, which was set after Roosevelt, and well, it was a good day. You know, we registered some Democrats. It wasn't. We were for John Edwards, but it was still the primary. So once Obama got the nomination, well, John kind of that was some really heartbreaking National Enquirer level stuff. He gave a great speech, but at this point, I'm not really certain whether it's even warranted. Well, would he have made a difference? No, because we shop on price. Price and we'll need to a lesser extent. We've just been trained to shop. Never mind the other stuff. We've been trained to shop. And I don't know what streaming service to put this on. Should I do two? No, we're not going to do 2 Twitch channels. Okay, this is Instagram. I do like Instagrams. Because I think there's something where they have a... I think Instagram has something where... No, I'm not on fire yet. Ooh. Okay, well I kind of like this one. Kind of like this. Get my pirate headband on. Well, my goodness. Take it for granted that everything has like a really clear instructions and laws. Forget the importance of why these navies existed. Because if you're traveling on the sea, that's no nation. There's no nation that owns the surface of the water. You know, China has like 200 miles of land. That's also a kind of, well, I'd like to go back into the records of how big this thing has to be. It doesn't, the 200 miles away, I don't know. But if it's orderly shipping, then it's orderly shipping. Can you still see me? I can't see me. Oh, yeah. Starry night, I think So what I'm going to be reading is what you see on the screen. So, well, I don't know the titles up there, but it's definitely. Well, I went on like I started looking up authors with my name on it. Well, my surname, the one that I was raised with. But holding on to a name, that bad. Okay, I'm gonna start over. I read portion of this. I read portion of this the other day. Lights and Shadows, Chapter 1. Okay. Oh, I missed the entire in Confederate prisons. Lights and Shadows? Lights and Shadows. Lights and Shadow. Light and Shadow. Confederate. Okay, let me just check on. All these Instagram. Oh. Oh. There we go. My Instagram has a kind of charcoal. It's a David Linkletter, Richard Linkletter stuff. All right. Let me see if this camera over here. No. I'll get up and clean. I'm gonna read for an hour till 9:30. I always say I'm gonna clean. I obviously don't really do it that well. Chapter 1. The First or Forenoon Battle of Winchester. Indecisive. Sheridan's and Early's mistakes. The capture. War is hell, said our great strategist, General W.T. Sherman. According to its latest code, with few or no exceptions, the end justifies the means, and, if necessary to success, it is right to do wrong. 50 years ago, one of the fairest regions on earth was that portion of Virginia extending southwesterly about 120 miles from Harper's Ferry to the divide beyond Staunton, where rise the headwaters of the James. Walled in by the Blue Ridge on the southeast and parallel ranges of the Alleghenies on the northwest, it takes its name from the beautiful river which winds along its length, in which the Indians poetically christened Shenandoah, daughter of the stars. When some 300 of us prisoners of war walked wearily 100 miles from Winchester to Staunton in September 1864, it was still rich and lovely. A few weeks later, the necessities of war made it a scene of utter desolation. Grant had rightly concluded, says Sheridan, that it was time to bring the war home to a people engaged in raising crops from a prolific soil to feed the country's enemies, and devoting to the Confederacy its best youth. I endorsed the program in all its parts, for the stores of meat and grain that the Valley provided and the men it furnished for Lee's depleted regiments were the strongest auxiliaries he possessed. Accordingly, Grant issued orders with increasing emphasis, particularly in August and September, to make the whole region a barren waste, to destroy or carry off the crops and animals, to do all possible damage to railroads, seize stock of every description, take away all Negro laborers so as to prevent further planting, hold as prisoners of war, if sympathizing with the rebellion, all male citizens under 50 years of age capable of bearing arms, etc. In obedience to these commands, Sheridan engaged with alacrity in the work of destruction. In a few weeks, he reported as follows: I have destroyed 2,000 barns filled with wheat, hay, and farming implements, over 70 mills filled with flour and wheat, and driven in front of my army 4,000 head of stock. Said one of his officers who knew whereof he was speaking, a crow flying through the valley would have to carry his own rations, for he could pick up nothing. At Winchester, the principal town in Shenandoah Valley, 150 miles northwest of Richmond, with a population of about 4,000. The 19th of that September was a day of glory, but also of sorrow. 4,680 of the Union Army, killed and wounded, told how dearly Sheridan's first great victory was gained. The battle was fought over 3, 4, or 5 square miles, east and north from Winchester, for the most part near the Opequon Creek, from which it is sometimes called the Battle of the Opequon. To reach the field, the bulk of Sheridan's army, starting at 3 o'clock in the morning from Berryville, 10 miles east, had to pass through a gorge in which for a considerable distance the turnpike extends toward Winchester. Sheridan's plan at first was to bring his army, except Merritt's and Averill's divisions of Torbert's cavalry, through the defile, post the 6th Corps on the left, and the 19th on the right, throw Crook's army of West Virginia across the Staunton Turnpike, leading southwest from Winchester, and so cut off all retreat up the valley. Meanwhile, those 2 cavalry divisions were to make a long detour on the right to the north from Berryville and close in upon the Confederate left. Sheridan felt sure of victory, for we outnumbered the enemy nearly 2 to 1. Had our army got into position early in the morning, we should have captured or destroyed the whole of them. At early dawn, McIntosh's brigade of Wilson's division of Torby's cavalry dashed through the ravine, closely followed by Chapman's brigade and 5 batteries of horse artillery. Sheridan and his staff followed. They surprised and captured a small earthwork, and though fiercely assaulted, held it till the van of the 6th Corps relieved them. The narrow pass of the Berryville pike was so obstructed by artillery, ambulances, ammunition wagons, etc., that it was nearly 8 o'clock before the 6th Corps, which should have been in position with Wilson's cavalry at sunrise, began to arrive, and it was fully 2 hours later when the 19th Corps debouched and deployed. Here was miscalculation or bad management, or both. This long delay, which the quick-moving cavalry leader Sheridan had not foreseen nor provided for, gave time for Early to call in the strong divisions of Generals Gordon, Breckinridge, and Rhodes from the vicinity of Stephenson's depot several miles away. They left Patton's brigade of infantry and a part of Fitzhugh Lee's cavalry to oppose Torbay. Hearing nothing from Torbay, who had now been gone 7 or 8 hours on his circuitous route, Sheridan suddenly changed his whole plan of action, a perilous maneuver in the face of an active enemy while the battle is already raging intermittently. Instead of flinging Crook's army of West Virginia, 17 regiments and 3 batteries, across the Staunton Pike to front northeasterly and cut off all possible retreat of the Confederates, he determined to move it to our right and deploy it in line with the 19th. Doubtless this was best under the circumstances, though it left to the enemy the broad, smooth highway as a line of retreat up the valley. Grover's division, 2nd of the 19th Corps, and 4 brigades formed line of battle in front and to the right of the gorge. In touch on the left was Ricketts' division of the 6th Corps, and resting on Ricketts' left was Getty's division of the same corps. Getty had 16 regiments in line, Ricketts 12 with 6 batteries, Grover 20 with 3 batteries. Had Sheridan been able to strike Early by 8:30 with the 6th and 19th, he would have crushed him in detail. Had Early massed the divisions of Gordon, Breckinridge, and Rhodes, and hurled them at the mouth of the canyon at 10 o'clock while half of the 19th was still entangled in it, he would probably have split our army into 3 parts and destroyed those already arrived. It was now 11 o'clock, and the Army of West Virginia at last emerged from the defile to make room for its movement in our rear behind Grover's division, and to hold the enemy in play until it should have taken its place on the right of the 19th, and perhaps to wait there the appearance of Torby's cavalry. It was desirable that Grover should advance. Sheridan, of course, meant the whole front of the 6th and 19th to keep in a continuous line. At first, it seemed to me that the regiments of the 19th overlapped, but the lines of advance were slightly divergent, and wide breaks began to appear between battalions. Especially on the left of the 19th, a large and widening gap appeared, for Ricketts had been instructed to guide on the Berryville pike, and that bore away to the left and south. My battalion, the veteran 13th Connecticut Infantry, should have been led by my Colonel C.D. Blinn, but he was sick the night before, and in the morning, at the crossing of the Opequon, he fell out and left the command to me. He had no part in the battle. Our 13th deserves a passing notice. It was the favorite regiment of General Burge, its first colonel. When he was made brigadier, the regiment entered the brigade commanded by Colonel E.L. Molyneux. Berg was never so happy as when riding into action, and Molyneux, who had been severely wounded in the same battle with me, was not overcautious. My regiment in both brigades, the 1st and 2nd of Grover's division, had caught the spirit of those two commanders. Quite generally, they mistook the forward movement for an immediate charge. We had been under an intermittent fire for some time, but now the advance intensified the conflict. The chief anxiety of good soldiers at such a time, as I often notice, is to get at the enemy as soon as possible and cease to be mere targets. Their enthusiasm now accelerated their pace to a double quick. It was carrying them too far to the front. Burge and Molyneux endeavored in vain to check their rapidity. My battalion, I think, was nearest the rebel line. Between 11 and 12, the divisions of Getty, Ricketts, and Grover, 48 regiments in all, to which were attached 8 light batteries with reserve artillery, began to move forward. It was a grand spectacle. At first the movement was steady, and we thought of Scott's lines. The host moves like a deep-sea wave, where rise no rock its pride to brave, high swelling, dark and slow. But all is quickly changed. Looking back upon that scene after the lapse of more than 50 years, its magnificence has not yet faded. I see as in a dream our long bending wave of blue rolling slowly at first, but with increasing speed, foam tipped with flags here and there, and steel crested with Berg's bayonets yonder. Glimpses of cavalry in the distance moving as if on wings with the lightness of innumerable twinkling feet. Numberless jets of smoke across the fields, marking the first line of Confederate infantry, their musketry rattling precisely like exploding bunches of firecrackers. Batteries galloping to position, the thunder of a dozen smiting the ear more rapidly than one could count. The buzz, hiss, whistle, shriek, crash, hurricane of projectiles, the big shot from batteries in front and from Braxton's artillery on our right, ripping up the ground and bounding away to the rear and the left. Horses and riders disappearing in the smoke of exploding shells. The constant shouting of our officers indistinctly heard, and now and then the peculiar well-known "Rebel yell." Finally the command, "Halt! Lie down!" Mullenix and Burge were too far to the front, and the line must be rectified. Ricketts, as we pressed forward, had thrown Kiefer's brigade, 2nd Division of 3rd Division, 6th Corps, 7 regiments, into the broadening interval directly in front of the mouth of the gorge, but it was not sufficient. It was now Early's opportunity, but he was hours too late, just as Sheridan had been. He had seen our 6th Corps and the 19th emerge and deploy, had beheld our rapid and somewhat disorderly approach, had noted the widening spaces between our battalions and divisions, had observed the havoc wrought by his artillery and musketry, 10,000 of our soldiers seeming to sink under it, had had time to mass his forces, and now it was up to him to hurl them against our center. It was the strategy inaugurated by Epaminondas at Electra, and perfected by Napoleon in many a hard battle, breaking the enemy's center by an irresistible charge, dividing and conquering. Rhodes had been killed at a battery in front of our brigade. His veterans and Gordon, 6,000 strong, constituted the charging column. Neither Sheridan nor any other Federal historian appears to have done justice to this charge. Pickett's at Gettysburg was not more brilliant. With yells distinctly heard above the roar, they advanced. The batteries on each side redoubled their discharges. From our irregular line of infantry extending more than a mile blazed incessant sheets and spurts of flame. the smoke at times hiding the combatants. Gordon was heard toward the now nearly empty ravine. My horse had just been shot under me. I lost two in that fight. Dismounted, I walked from the right of my battalion to the left, cautioning my men against wasting their ammunition, bidding them take sure aim, pick out the rebel officers, and not fire too high. They were shooting from a recumbent position and resting on one knee, lying flat on their backs to reload. As I reached the left, I glanced to the right and saw several of them starting to their feet, and a little further on, two or three began to run back. I rushed to the spot, shouting, "Back to your places!" I saw the cause. The regiments on our right were retreating. I was astounded, for we were expecting the order to advance instantly. At that moment, Lieutenant Handy, an aide of our brigadier commander, rode up, pale, excited, his hands flung up as if in despair. My men were springing to their feet. "What are those orders?" I demanded. "Retreat, retreat, get to the rear as fast as possible," he replied. "Battalion, rise up, shoulder arms," I commanded. Before I could finish the order, one of Sheridan's staff came on a swift gallop, his horse white with foam. "For God's sake, what does this mean?" said he. "This retreat must be stopped." "Battalion, lie down," I shouted. "Our brigadier commander ordered a retreat." "It's all wrong. If this position's lost, all's lost. Here you have some cover. Hold it to the last. I'll bring supports immediately." Striking spurs into his steed, he vanished in the direction of the retreating regiments. Except the few who had heard my commander remained in position, perhaps 75 or 100, who kept blazing away at the Confederates, rising a little to kneel and fire. Grover's division, and all we could see of that of Ricketts, had gone to pieces, swept away like chaff before a whirlwind. Not a Union flag now in sight, but plenty of the stars and bars. Our sputtering fire checked some directly in front, but most of the onrushing masses were deflected by the nature of the ground. Out of our view, and about a half a mile in our rear, was Dwight's division, the first of the 19th Corps. It had been left in reserve. It was in line of battle and ready for the onset. The confused fragments of Grover rallied behind it. Had the ground been favorable, and had no unexpected opposition been encountered, Gordon would have crushed Dwight. But in fewer minutes than we have occupied in describing this charge, a tremendous and prolonged roar in battle told us that the battle was on behind us more than in front. Amid the din arose a quick succession of deafening crashes, and shots and shell came singing and howling over us from the left. Russell's division, first of the 6th Corps, comprising 11 infantry regiments and one of heavy artillery, behind which the broken battalions of Ricketts had been reassembling, was now smiting the right flank of Gordon's 6,000. Although the charge came too late, we cannot but admire the strategy that directed it and the bravery of the infantry of Gordon, Rhodes, and Ramseur, as well as that of the cavalry of Lomax, Jackson, and Johnson, and of Fitzhugh Lee, who fell severely wounded. But they had not foreseen the terrible crossfire from Russell, who died at the head of his division, a bullet piercing his breast and a piece of shell tearing through his heart. Nor had they calculated on confronting the long line of Dwight, 9 regiments with the 5th New York Battery, all of which stood like a stone breakwater. Against it, Gordon's masses, broken by the irregularities of the ground, dashed in vain. Under the ceaseless fire of iron and lead, the refluent waves came pouring back. Our army was saved. But we few, who, in obedience to explicit orders from headquarters, had held our position stiffly farthest to the front when all the rest of Grover's and Ricketts' thousands had retreated, we were lost. A column behind a rebel flag was advancing straight up upon us, unchecked by our vigorous fire. Seeing that they meant business, I commanded, "Fix bayonets!" At that instant, the gray surges converged upon us right and left, especially in our rear. We seemed in the middle of the rebel army, in the center of such a volcano, fine-spun theories, poetic resolves to die rather than be captured. These are point lace in a furnace. A Union officer, Captain W. Frank Tiaman, of the 159th New York Molyneux Brigade, was showing fight, and half a dozen Confederates with clubbed muskets were rushing upon him. I leaped to the spot, sword in hand, and shouted with all the semblance I could assume of fierce authority, Down with those muskets! Stop! I command you! They lowered them. Who the hell are you? They asked. I'll let you know, turning instantly to 4 or 5 Confederate officers. I demanded. Do you mean to massacre my men? 2 or 3 replied, No! By gee! You've shown yourselves brave, and you shall be respected. Yes, you fought D blank D well, seeing you had the darndest brigade to fight against in the whole Confederate army. I mean, he in the book that he doesn't like to swear, and this is a different type of people. What brigade are you? I asked. Ramseur's old brigade, and there's nothing this side of hell can lick it. You're brave enough, said another, but damn you, you've killed our best general. Who's that? I asked. Rhodes, killed right in front of you. I thought Early was your best general. Not by a D sight. Old Jubal's drunk as a fool. I was never more highly complimented than at this point, but the stunning consciousness of being a prisoner, the bitterest experience of my life, the unspeakable disappointment, the intense mortification, these are even to this day poorly mitigated, much less compensated, by the excessive praises heaped upon me by those Confederate officers for my supposed bravery. That they were sincere I cannot doubt, for it was customary on the battlefield for the rebels to strip prisoners of all valuables, but no one of the 50 or 100 near me was robbed. Tayaman, whose life I had perhaps saved, was even privileged to keep his canteen of whiskey, of which he gave me a drink by and by to keep me in good spirits. I realized the truth of Burns' lines. Inspiring bold John Burleycorn, what dangers thou canst make us scorn. We tapene, we fear nay evil. We Uskabara, we face the devil. Burns. Yeah, I've been drinking very hard the past few days. Went the month sober. I think I'm going to do that again. If you go to prison and food runs out. So footnotes: One Personal Memoirs, Volume 1, page 487. So there's more stuff he's written. 2. In New Orleans, it was known as Butler's Dandy Regiment, for it was then better dressed than any other. So I'm not going to go back and to try to find all this, waste time. This is just footnotes, Kindles. It wore dark blue, which Burge had procured through his uncle, Buckingham, the war governor of Connecticut. At the siege of Port Hudson, it had distinguished itself above all other regiments by furnishing as volunteers nearly 1/4 of the celebrated storming column of 1,000 men called for by General M.P. Banks the second day after the disastrous assault on that fortress, June 14, 1863. Burge was selected by Banks to lead the forlorn hope. Footnote 3. 6,000 is Gordon's statement in his Reminiscences, page 320. Chapter 2. Because I am doing an old-timey here, and I got my... Forgive me, I didn't roll the smoke myself, but one of the great privileges, unexpected privileges of going to war for, is that really when you get a bunch of soldiers, hey, why not drink it? My goodness. My hand strength. This bottle is... There we go. I can't tell. There's been a lot of trauma in the world. Oh. I don't know what their plan is. See, at least the story I'm reading, this is about a civil war. Where people put on people who want to fight put on the gray and people put on the blue. There, I can tell you from my reading of it, a lot of different perspectives on it, because this is told through a Yale professor's. That's later on, I believe Homer Baxter, whatever his name is. My father asked me about it because his birth dates are different than another Homer. There's a Homer that is simultaneously do ancestry. Well, it's based on censuses of going to downtown, knocking on doors. How many people live here? Where do you come? Well, it's a more trusting society to knock on a door. Just take an estimate of our rate of change. See, if you look, they marched 100 miles. They didn't get on a bus. They didn't get on buses like we used to get on buses and be moved around. This is older. This is more older. So bear with me. I think that took me less than half hour, so I can do another chapter. It's so funny. I have a. I wonder if my Streamlabs would work because I'm subscribed there. The tech companies don't really care. They get paid. They get paid regardless. You know, especially if you can't sign on and cancel your subscription. Just Amazon alone is more than the cable company. My goodness, when cable company was $159 for you had the $159, I barely watch TV. Why can't I just get the internet by itself and get like for $30? Well, I mean, Amazon doesn't even have internet connections that they turn their devices into the. I don't know. I have to look it up. The Amazon Web thing, they have a mesh. And I guess you have to be like that. I guess I'd have to actually look how the mesh program works. Because the mesh is so we can share. Like those of us who have a lot of internet connection, if we have Amazon devices, it will send like a hidden Wi-Fi out. So there's like an Amazon West Wi-Fi that like everybody, little parts of the internet we're not using, well, it's borrowed. And it's like Amazon borrows blueprints for that people have spent their lives working on. Well, oh well. I'll be back. All right. It went out. Fine. Naturally grown green leaf. Well, what one person calls it at one time or another, who knows? Tilling more followers. All right. I don't know how many more days I have here, or I've paid for. It's like I'm extended again to travel. Chapter 2. Or it could be chapter 11, Roman numerals. At Winchester, on the road thence to Tom's Brook, Newmarket, and Staunton. There were 2 battles that Monday between Sheridan and Early, the first indecisive, though bloody, a drawn game. The second, after a comparative lull of several hours, a fierce struggle in which the whole front of the 6th, 19th, and Crook's Corps simultaneously advanced, in Torbert's cavalry, arriving at last after their unaccountable delay upon our extreme right, made a magnificent charge, crumbling up all the enemy's left. The victory was real, but not so complete as it should have been. Sheridan ought to have captured or destroyed the whole of Early's army. Instead, he left them in open line of retreat. He took only 5 pieces of artillery, 9 battle flags, and some 12 or 1,500 prisoners, and, to use his own words, sent the Confederates whirling up the valley. In the recall of Gordon's brilliant charge of 6,000 about noon, we prisoners were swept along into Winchester and then locked in the old Masonic Hall. The sociable guards took pains to emphasize the statement that George Washington, glorious rebel they called him, had presided as Grand Master in that very room. After several hours we heard a great noise in the streets. Looking out, we saw men, women, children moving rapidly hither and thither, the current for the most part setting toward the southwest. The din increased, the panic became general. The Union army was advancing on Winchester. We were hustled into the street, now filled with retreating hundreds, and were marched rapidly along the turnpike toward the setting sun. The road crowded with artillery, army wagons, common carriages, all pouring along in the stampede. A formidable provost guard enclosing us prisoners in a sort of hollow column, cavalry in front, flank and rear, the fields on either side swarming with infantry, the whole of Early's army in retreat, we apparently in the middle of it, Sheridan's guns still booming in our rear. Such was the scene as we 200 or 300 prisoners were driven on. Our mingled emotions can be better imagined than described. The bitter regret that we had not been slain, the consciousness that we had done our whole duty in facing unflinchingly the storm of shot and shell, never retreating an inch, the evident respect and courtesy with which I was personally treated, the inspiring certainty that our army was victorious, the unspeakable mortification of being ourselves prisoners of war. We sorely needed all our philosophy and all our religion to sustain us. Marching moodily along, I was aroused from a sort of reverie by an experience far too common in those days. I had been sick the night before, and had worn my overcoat into battle. My horse was shot. The blood was spurting from him. As he seemed likely to fall, I leaped down. We were in the midst of a rapid advance, and I had not time to throw off my overcoat. I was now carrying it swung over my arm. It was growing dark. A mounted soldier, whom I took to be an officer, rode up to my side and seized hold of the coat. He said, "I want that overcoat." I replied, "You can't have it." "I must have it." "You shan't have it." He tugged and I tugged, and as I was on foot and sober, I nearly dragged him from his horse before he let go. During the tussle, I repeatedly shouted, "Captain of the guard! Help! Help!" The provost captain instantly came riding to the spot. "What's the matter?" he asked. "That rascal has tried to rob me of my overcoat," I answered, pointing to the villain who was beginning to slink away. The captain appeared to recognize him, said not a word to him, but whispered to me a moment later, "You are entitled to keep your overcoat." We had had little breakfast and no dinner nor supper.
but we suffered more from thirst than hunger. Can we ever forget it? Will the long flight never end? On through Kirsten, without halting, we march, with promise of rest and water at Newton. No rest nor water there. On from Newtown, with assurance of water at Middletown. 5 minutes at Middletown, and a little muddy water that seems to aggravate our thirst. Farther on, we cross a bridge under which the water is dashing as if in mockery, and the cry, "Water! Water!" rises from 100 lips, the guard joining, for they are suffering like ourselves. Some comfort in that. Past midnight, we reach Strasbourg and are halted around an old wooden pump. It is broken. No water there. Still on at a snail pace, up and over the almost interminable stretch of Fisher's Hill. At 3 o'clock in the morning, we arrive at a place known by the classical name of Tom's Brook, about 25 miles from Winchester. Never was nectar more delicious than the water of the stream, nor downy pillow more welcome than the sod on its banks. Without blankets or covering, we sank in each other's arms for mutual warmth on the dew-drenched grass, in blistered feet, in aching limbs, in hunger and thirst, in suffocating despair are all forgotten. Morning came unnoticed, except by those whom the keen cold permitted to sleep no longer. Towards noon we rose, washed without soap or towel, were made to form a line, had our names taken, and received as rations a pint of flour per man, with a little salt, nothing else. How to cook or prepare the flour? We learned of the rebel guards a process not laid down in the cookbooks. Mixing with water, they made a stiff paste or dough. This they put around the end of a stick, about the size and half the length of a walking cane. The end thus thickly coated, they hold it over a little fire till the smoke and flame has sufficiently hardened it. Then pull out your stick, and you have a thick chunk or cylinder of bread, not quite so tough as a gun barrel, but substantial. I contrived to keep a little memorandum book. In it I noted down that there were 311 of us prisoners. 2 lieutenant colonels, 2 majors, 4 captains, 9 lieutenants, and 294 enlisted men. These were in the march from Winchester. A few may have been added to our number at Tom's Brook. I stated how it happened that none of those near me were robbed when captured. Those at a distance were not so fortunate, for, if circumstances permitted, the Confederates, being themselves sadly in want, often improved the opportunity to grab every article of value. At Tom's Brook I noted in my diary the following: Major A.W. Wakefield, 49th Pennsylvania Cavalry, was robbed of hat, blanket, and $100 in money. Adjutant G.A. Clark, 17th Pennsylvania Cavalry, was robbed of cap, boots, mug, pocketbook, and money. Lieutenant Harrison, 2nd Regular Cav, was robbed of gold, watch, and money. Captain John R. Rouser, 6th Maryland Infantry, was robbed by an officer of hat and $20 in money. Lieutenant Wesley C. Howe, 2nd Massachusetts Cavalry, who recently died at Kansas City, Missouri, was robbed by Lieutenant Hustle of the 6th Virginia Cavalry of silver watch, spurs, gloves, and $10 in money. Major August Harrond, 4th New York Cavalry, was robbed of a watch and $60 in money. It was a common practice to snatch from a Union prisoner his cap and clap on, in lieu of it, a worn-out slouched hat, pull off his boots, substitute a pair of clumsy old shoes. The plundering was so thoroughly done that it was poetically termed "going through a captive." As I was the senior officer among the prisoners, and we seemed likely to remain a long time there, I went to the Confederate commander and besought him to allow our 300 prisoners to occupy a barn nearby. He refused. I then asked that we be allowed to build wigwams for shelter, as there was abundant material at hand. This too was not permitted. I also begged in vain that a surgeon should be got to dress the wounds of some of the prisoners. The second morning after our arrival, the sleeping men were aroused by the loud voice of Lieutenant Sergeant of the 14th New Hampshire Regiment, exclaiming, "If you give me any more of your lip, I'll annihilate you. I've but one arm." His right arm was disabled by a shot. "But even with one arm, I'll annihilate you on the spot if you give me any more of your lip." This was exceedingly gratifying, for it proved that at least 2 of us were not yet annihilated. During our sojourn at Tom's Brook, the Confederates labored hard to induce us to exchange our greenbacks for their paper currency. Our own was sadly depreciated, $1 of silver or gold being equal to 2 of greenbacks. But one in the United States paper was equal in purchasing power to 8 of theirs. They argued that our money would certainly be forcibly taken from us by rapacious guards farther south, and kindly offered us for one. Sergeant Reed of the Provost Guard was quite a character. Like Greciano in The Merchant of Venice, he talked loud and long, speaking an infinite deal of nothing. He had a mania for watches. He told me how he had 27 which he had obtained from Yankee prisoners, always paying them in good Confederate money. He set his heart upon a little silver watch of mine, which he said he wished to buy and present to one of his lady admirers. I asked, "Why do they admire you?" "Because of my bravery," he replied. "None but the brave deserve the fair." "If you are so brave, why are you back here? Why are you not at the front?" "Colonel, I've been in the forefront of the hottest battles. I've been fearfully wounded. I'll be hanged if I haven't been one of the bravest of the brave. Twice, Colonel, I was shot all into inch pieces, and so now I'm put on light duty." On Thursday, the third day after our arrival, 2 India rubber men, circus performers of the 22nd Indiana Regiment, gave an exhibition of ground and lofty tumbling for the entertainment of their fellow prisoners. They had somehow contrived to retain the gaudy costume of the ring. They were really skillful. While they were watching with interest the acrobatic performance, a squadron of the Confederate General Imboden's cavalry dashed past us. Sergeant Reed, who had just made me an offer for my watch, sprang to his feet, exclaiming, "I swear there must be a battle going on in front, for there goes Imboden's cavalry to the rear. Sure sign I'll be hanged if we ain't getting licked again." We had heard the cannonading in the distance, but paid little attention to it. There were Richmond papers announcing that Fisher's Hill was impregnable to the whole Yankee army, were said to have been received about an hour before the heights were actually carried by storm. Again, Early's army was not captured, but sent whirling up the valley. We prisoners thoroughly enjoyed the changed aspect of affairs. At first they marched us directly back a short distance up the slope towards the advancing Yankees, but they seemed suddenly to discover their mistake. They halted, faced about, and marched down. Hilarious and saucy, our boys struck up the song, and 300 voices swelled the chorus. "Rally round the flag, boys, rally once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom, the Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah, down with the traitor, up with the star," etc., till Captain Haslett of the Provost Guard came riding into the mist with savage oaths, shouting, "Silence! Silence! Silence!" 27 miles, first through stifling dust and then through pelting rain, past Hawkinstown, Woodstock, Edinburgh, Mount Jackson, brought us to Newmarket. On the march, Colonel Britton of the Pennsylvania Regiment, a new arrival, planned with me an escape. He had campaigned through the valley, was familiar with the lay of the land, and said he had friends among the inhabitants. Our plan was to run past the guards in the darkness. As a preliminary step, I cut off my shoulder straps, which were very bright. Within half an hour, Sergeant Reed came up to me and asked, "Colonel, where's your shoulder straps?" I replied, "I don't wear shoulder straps now I'm a prisoner." "But, Colonel," he answered, "I've been looking at them shoulder straps since we left Tom's Brook. I wanted to buy 'em of you for a present to one of my girls. I'll be hanged if I don't believe you're going to try to escape, and so you've cut off your bright shoulder straps. But, Colonel, it's impossible. I'll be hanged if I hadn't rather lose any 6 of the others than to lose you." The fellow stuck closer to me than a brother all the rest of that night, so close that he lost sight of Colonel Britton, who actually escaped about midnight at a place called Edinburgh. Almost immediately, Sergeant Reed came to me and asked, "Colonel, where's that other colonel?" I answered, "You ought to know. I don't." "I'll be hanged," said he, "if I haven't lost him a watching you." At Newmarket they put us into a dilapidated church building. The wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous is bold as a lion, was repeatedly misquoted from the book of Proverbs, and not without reason. We concluded that if that interpretation was correct, we had reason enough for obeying the injunction in Ecclesiastes, "Be not righteous overmuch," for the little jumpers were fearless and countless. They were reinforced by a Confederate deacon who recommended two things: Confederate paper and gospel piety. The one would carry us safely through this world, the other through the next. He would be only too happy to furnish us the currency in exchange for our greenbacks. Confederate treasury bills and true religion was the burden of his song. To one of our literary officers, it was said, squelched him, "Deacon, your recipe of happiness, rebel paper and godliness, Confederate money and a Christian spirit, reminds me of what Byron says in one of his wicked poems. Beyond all doubt, there's not the spirit cheers like rum and true religion." He subsided. We left Newmarket at noon, Saturday, September 24th, and marched all the afternoon and all night past Harrisonburg, Mount Crawford, Mount Sidney, and Willow Springs, reaching Staunton, Virginia about 9 in the morning. On the march, 43 miles in 21 hours, we were hungry, for the morning ration at Newmarket was scanty, and they gave us nothing more except a small loaf of wheat bread. Some of the guard were kind to us. One of them, Private John Crew, Company Echo, 11th Alabama Regiment, unsolicited by us, and so far as I am aware, without hope of any reward, would endeavor to bring us apples or other food. Whenever we halted, he was careful to write his name in my diary. As we trudged along, a lively discussion of slavery ensued. Lieutenant Howard of the Provost Guard was a learned champion of the peculiar institution, and I was pronounced an abolitionist. He was an ardent fire-eater, to use the term then in vogue, and I, who had lost my position as principal of the Worcester High School by my defense of John Brown, was equally intense. Both were pretty well posted on the subject. He seemed to be familiar with the Bible and the pro-slavery arguments, including drunken Noah's "cursed Canaan," Moses Stuart's conscience and the Constitution, Nehemiah Adams' South Side view of slavery, and Reverend Doctor, the name is gone from me, of Baltimore's sermons. I was fresh from reading the arguments of George B. Cheever, Horace Bushnell, Henry Ward Beecher, Garrison, Phillips, and the rest. He proved that slavery among the Hebrews was a divine institution. I answered they were commanded to undo the heavy burdens, let the oppressed go free, and break every yoke. He said Paul sent back the fugitive slave Onesimus to his master Philemon. I rejoined, Paul said, I send him back not as a servant, but above a servant, a brother beloved, receive him as myself. He quoted the Constitution of the United States, the article commanding that fugitive slaves should be delivered back to their masters. In reply, I quoted from Deuteronomy, the higher law, Thou shalt not deliver unto his master the servant which is escaped from his master unto thee. He quoted from the great speech of the magnificent Webster in the Senate, March 7, 1850, in which he urged all good citizens to obey the fugitive slave law with alacrity. Waxing hot, I quoted from Beecher. As to those provisions which concern aid to fugitive slaves, may God do so to us, yea, and more also, if we do not spurn them as we would any other mandate of Satan. If in God's providence fugitives ask bread or shelter, raiment or conveyance at my hands, my own children shall lack bread ere they, my own flesh shall sting with cold ere they shall lack raiment. And whatsoever defense I would put forth for mine own children, that shall these poor, despised, persecuted creatures have at my hands. And on the road, the man that would do otherwise, that would obey the law to the peril of his soul and the loss of his manhood, were he brother, son, or father, shall never pollute my hand with grasp of hideous friendship, nor cast his swarthy shadow athwart my threshold. The lieutenant finally cited the examples of those glorious Southern patriots who led the rebellion against England during the first American Confederacy. Washington, Patrick, Madison, Jefferson, every one a slaveholder, he proudly exclaimed. I happened to be cognizant of their views and responded with some vehemence. But Washington's hands were tied so that he could not free slaves till his death. He said it was among his first wishes to see some plan adopted for putting an end to slavery. Patrick Henry declared, I cannot justify it. Madison expressed strongly his unwillingness to admit in the national constitution the idea that can hold property of man. In a rather loud voice, I quoted Jefferson, who, in view of our inconsistency in violating the self evident truth that all men are created equal, solemnly affirmed, I tremble for my country when I remember that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever. I had some reputation as an elocutionist in those days, and Sergeant Reed, who was listening with open mouth, broke in with, I'll be hanged, Colonel, if you weren't cut out for a preacher. But I should like to hear you preach. The best reply I could make was, you'll undoubtedly be hanged sometime, and if I were a minister, nothing would give me more satisfaction to be present at your execution and preach your funeral sermon. He replied, Now, Colonel, you don't mean that, but don't you think I'll ever be hanged? Indeed, I do. If you don't stop your profanity and general cussedness, I'll be hanged if I will, was his last word to me. I think Instagram cuts out after what, like an hour. Yeah. It's one of those funny things. I think back in my time, and whether it was wearing a uniform as part of official military or being like a cable guy television installer working for the military, uh, just hanging out with the guys, the most horrendous. And, I'm sorry, I know we have a lot of female technicians, but boy, to just be out there, as we could get in the car, let's go do a job. Afterward, get some coffee, smoke cigarettes, and just hang out. See, that's the joy of working in a place where people wanted to be. Well, I know. I know you're like wanting to be there. You haven't lived in America or haven't realized. Oh, but at the same time, those people, all the civilians. I mean, how many trails of tears are there? We have a few moments that stand out in American history, but oh, migration. Well, I'll probably stream on Facebook another reading. I got a lot out of this. I got a lot out of this. I'm gonna have to make sure to well, hopefully you hear another 2 chapters tomorrow. I figure a couple 2 chapters. I'll be able to read this book as a series. It's open copyright things. Oh, thank you, Project Gutenberg. You over there. What should I read? Morning of the Magicians? Yeah, I'm just gonna keep reading to you. I think that just reading a book, is it nice to be read to? This could be an ASMR. Ooh. Yeah, I could do like an ASMR recording on here. I mean, how many? What is ASMR? How many different ASMRs there are? People eating, and it's the sound. It's the sound of life. That's what it sounds like to me. It's like the ASMR where they're talking and giving men the girlfriend experience, just being talked to. So yeah, I like the story ones though. I'm scared of this book. Picked up a little thing, the Garanda Samhita by Sris Chandra Vasu. It's written instructions on how to do hatha yoga, and it's like, well, I can't remember what the book was. I picked up at the library. It was a kind of like I wouldn't say it was autobiography. It was like the diary of a, maybe that's what it's called, diary of a yogi. Well, anyway, they're talking about retreat in Kundalini yogi or Kundalina yoga, just activating the serpent energy. You say when that serpent energy, when it takes hold of somebody, it is dangerous. This has hatha things, and it's like, be forewarned. I see numerous books on yoga have been published in recent years. Publisher's preface. Let me see what this is. The Garanda Samhita, a treatise on Hatha Yoga, translated by Sris Chandra Basu, Theosophical Publishing House Ltd, 68 Russell Street, London, WC1B 3BU, Adyar, India, Wheaton, Illinois, USA. To Sri Guru Deva, whose practical illustrations and teachings convince the translator of the reality, utility, and the immense advantages of Hatha Yoga. This translation is respectfully dedicated by his humble Sevaka, the translator. First edition 1895, second 1933, third 1976. Published by arrangement with the Theosophical Publishing House of Adyar, India. Publisher's preface. Numerous books on yoga have been published in recent years, most of them dealing with the postures and breathing exercise of Hatha Yoga. The principal classics of this form of yoga are Garanda Samhita, the Goraksa Samhita, and the Hatha Yoga Pradipika of Sivatmarama. All these works include a few practices which might seem repellent and possibly unwise, so that one is tempted to publish an expurgated edition. It has, however, been dedicated to publish this edition in full so that the reader may appreciate the detailed methods recommended by the original authors for the control and purification of the physical body. This preface is in the nature of a warning that the extreme methods should not be attempted except under the guidance of a qualified person. These comments apply particularly to the first lesson. In the third lesson, the numbering of the mudras, pages 66 to 73, is not consistent. Mudras 16 to 20 have been lettered A through E, but it has been left as in the original edition. Forward. Garanda Samhita is a tantrika work, treating of Hatha Yoga. It consists of a dialogue between the sage Garanda and an inquirer called Chandakapali. Chandakapali. The book is divided into 7 lessons or chapters and comprises, in all, some 350 verses. It closely follows in the footsteps of the famous treatise on the Hatha Yoga known as Hatha Yoga Padipika. In fact, a large number of verses in Garanda Samhita's correspond verbatim with those of the Pradipika. It may therefore be presumed that one has borrowed from the other, or both have drawn from a common source. The book teaches yoga under 7 heads, or sadhanas. The first gives directions for the purification of the body inside and out. The second relates to postures, third to mudras, the fourth to pratyahara, the fifth to pranayama, the sixth to dhyana, and the seventh to samadhi. These are taught successively, a chapter being devoted to each. The theory of Hatha Yoga, to put it boldly, is that concentration or samadhi can be attained by purification of the physical body and certain physical exercises. The relation between physical shell, gata, and mind is so complete and subtle, and their interaction is so curious and so much enveloped in mystery, that it is not strange that Hatha Yogins should have imagined that certain physical training will induce certain mental transformations. Another explanation, and a later one, is that Hatha Yoga means the yoga or union between Ha and Ta, the meaning the sun, and the Ha meaning the sun, and the Ta the moon, or the union of the prana and the apana vayus. This is also a physical process carried to a higher plane. The first question which an unprejudiced inquirer will naturally put after perusing this book will be, are all these things possible, and do these practices produce the result attributed to them? As to the possibility of these practices, there can be no doubt. They do not violate any anatomical or physiological facts. The practices, some of them at least, may appear revolting and disgusting, but they are not per se impossible. Moreover, many of my readers have come across persons who can practically illustrate these. Such persons are by no means rare in India. Every place of pilgrimage, such as Benares and Allahabad, contains several of them in various stages of progression. My own guru showed me and all his visitors at Allahabad and Meerut several of these processes, and taught some people how to do them themselves. The difficult process, such as Varisara, Agnisara, Dandadwati, Vasudwati, etc., were all shown by him. So also the various fastis, neti, asanas, etc. Many of these may be classified as gymnastic exercises. Their performers need not always be holy or saint-like personages. Several jugglers have been known to perform various asanas and mudras and earn their livelihood by showing them to the public. For persons whose muscles have become stiffened and the bones hardened by age, the acquirement of several of these postures, etc., is next to impossible, and it is better that they should not court failure or disappointment by attempting these at an advanced age. But pranayama, regulation of breath, dharana, and dhyana are possible for all. As to the utility of these processes, genuine doubts may be entertained. Many of them may appear puerile and, if not positively injurious, at least useless, although it is not possible within the short space of my command to give the rationale of all these practices and to justify them to a doubting public. I shall briefly illustrate the advantages of some of them. Thus, to begin with the Vajrasara, it is the process of filling the stomach with air and expelling the wind through the posterior passage.
Well, you got to follow on. Somebody liked a lot of my videos or my things. Like your video. Okay. Well, you'll really like my you'll really like my new ones. Those are short ones. Oh, oh my goodness! I get like people following me on Instagram. I guess I'm Instagram popular, although I don't have a whole lot of likes. And again, it's the, if you didn't know, like when the big things on Twitter really started getting famous, it was for people liking tweets. It was like that was one they went after so many. As much as people tried to be like not political, just by liking a tweet, it may be a funny joke or just. Well, a lot of them they have to explain, but that's the whole thing. Some of them are like, well, that's 50-50 on reasons why they liked it. People, people are strange. And when you're a strange. Wait, do I get the DCMI for that? DMCA? Oh, people getting paid for like singing and dancing. At least like with sports stars, you can see them like working out and going. People are paying money to sit there and watch them play a game, and they can actually see it happening. My goodness, the singer, the right, just the entire music thing. It's just well, back in the day, you get that million downloads and be like $1 million. Oh, you mean I just released a song? It worked for a while, but that's the thing of being first in an opportunity, or in the first people to get it, and then there are waves, but then it peters out. I don't know why we use that so much. Peters out. Well, I read a funny thing about history of. Oh, I was watching a YouTube video and they have this. It's a Roman city in Turkey someplace, and very very nice just well the marvels, the buildings that they left behind. They had you show a Coliseum. I think they said it held 25,000 people. They do this number up to maybe. He said something about like they look at around the Roman cities. They figure the stadium would hold about 10% of the population. It's like 10%. So they figure it's like they had like stadium that had like 20,000 spectators for plays and performances, whatever people go to stadiums for, in the gladiator games. And well, they said times that by 10, and that was the population of the city. I was looking at basketball arenas, and like one I was looking at tonight was 17,000, which seems about right. Which seems about right because for a basketball game, I know they'd like to have 50,000 people, like football, but that's not 100 yards they run up and down. It's a much smaller thing. So watching just a cut watching stuff from that height. Well, anyway, let's go back. But football stadium is more of a more tell. Well, they draw people from around the state, like so the. What am I talking about? Okay, basketball. Because I was looking at basketball playoffs for tonight. So I was looking at the basketball. I'm like, okay, so the urban center, because it is a city square block. Is you look at these giant cities, and it's actually there are many cities grown together. So I was just using that as a rule of thumb, like the population density of Milwaukee sustainability for their stadium would be like 150,000 people. As to utility of this process, genuine doubts may be entertained. Many of them may appear puerile, and if not, oh yeah, that's what I was gonna do. I end up like I'd hit send on my thing. Oh, posterior. What is that? What's I saying? What I think it is? Posterior, posterior anatomy, further back in position
or near the rear or hind end, especially of the body or part of it, the posterior part of the gut. After coming in, after coming after in time or order later, a date posterior to the first reform bill. Oh, formal. Coming after in time or order later. Humorous. A person's buttocks. So I guess I can blow air out my ass. Is that what that's what it means? That's what he's saying. It sounds revolting. That word was exactly what I thought. It has a process of film. I shall briefly list the advantages of some of them. Thus, to begin with, Vadasara. It is the process of filling the stomach with air and expelling the wind through the posterior passage. The greatest duct or canal in the human body is the alimentary canal, beginning with the esophagus, throat, and ending with the rectum. It is some 26 feet in length. This great drain contains all the rubbish of the body. Nature periodically cleanses it. Yoga practice makes that cleansing through involuntarily. If the cleansing is incomplete, then the foetid matter putrefy in the stomach and intestines and generate noxious and deleterious gases which cause disease. Wow. Stomach rot and farts that could actually go and wow. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Now, Vatasara, by passing a current of air through the canal, causes the oxidation of the foetid products of the body, and thus conduces to health and increases digestion. In fact, it gives a tone to the whole system. Similarly, Varisara is flushing the canal with water instead of air. It thoroughly purges the whole canal and does the same work as an aperient or a purgative, but with 10 times more efficacy and without the injurious effects of these drugs. A person knowing Vadasara and Varisara stands in no need of purgatives. The same may be said of Bahiskrata Dauti by Agnisara. The nerves, I guess this is chapter 1, verse 22, and chapter 1, verse 20. The nerves and muscles of the stomach are brought under the control of volition, and by the gentle shaking of the stomach and the intestines, these organs lose their lethargy and act with greater vigor. The washing taught in 123 to 24 is a little dangerous. It may lead to prolapses, and a person who can do Varisara need not do this. The advantages of cleaning the teeth and the tongue are obvious and need not be dilated upon you. The lengthening of the tongue, 132, is necessary for performing hibernation. In doing this, man but imitates the lower creation like frogs, etc., who in hibernating turn their tongues upward, closing the respiratory passage. Perhaps the most interesting of all dhatis is the Vasodhati, 141, which has led unobservant persons to the belief that the yogins can bring out the intestines by the mouth, wash them, and then swallowing them. Again, place them in their proper position. This dhati is, however, a very simple process, and by doing so, the mucus, phlegm, etc., adhering to the sides of the alimentary canal are removed. Water and air could not remove these viscid substances that stick to the sides of the canal. The neti, an easy process, clears the nostrils and cures the tendency or predisposition to cold and catarrh. The Kapalabhati, 155, is a means of cleansing the frontal sinus, said to be the seat of intelligence. This hollow cannot be directly reached from the outside, but by this process of Kapalabhati, the nerves surrounding it and spreading over the forehead are brought into play and invigorated. The various asanas taught in chapter 2 are gymnastic exercises good for general health and peace of mind and calming of passions. The 32 asanas taught in this book are not all of equal efficacy or importance. Padmasana is generally approved by all. The others may be practiced occasionally for variation and recreation. Some of these postures help in checking animal passions by causing atrophy of the nerves of particular places. Others, by straining and stretching of certain muscles, create a pleasant sensation of strength and refreshment. The asanas are antidotes to the sedentary contemplation of yoga, a habit which may otherwise lead to mental hallucinations and nervous disorders. The asanas are antidotes to the sedentary contemplation of yoga, a habit which may otherwise lead to mental hallucinations and nervous disorders. I guess I don't know. He's sitting alone all the time. I, well, yeah, nervous disorders, mental hallucinations. The mudras are similar to asanas in their action and efficacy. The gazing taught in some of these induces hypnotic sleep, and the bandhas, by closing all the exits for air, produce a tension within the system, generating thereby a sort of electric current or force called Kundalini Sakti. It is this Sakti which is the helpmate of the yogins in performing their wonders. The Kakari Mudra 3:25-27 causes levitation of the body. That levitation is possible has now been established beyond doubt. What the particular conditions are under which this takes place has not yet been fully investigated by Western science, but that the restraining of breath is one of these conditions may be said to be an undoubted truth. The Saktikalana is a mysterious process, and until a person practically realizes it, he can hardly believe it. The mudras are mixed physical and mental processes, a bridge between asanas and pratyahara. The subject of pratyahara is treated in chapter 4 in 5 slokas. It is the process of restraining the mind from wandering and restricting it to a fixed idea. All the 5 senses must be controlled, and they should not be allowed to divert the attention. Pranayama is the hatha yoga par excellence. It is as dangerous when practiced without the supervision of a competent teacher as it is useful when practiced under his supervision. To quote the words of a great authority on this subject, by practicing it according to rule, all diseases are destroyed, but by doing so irregularly, all diseases are generated, such as hiccup, asthma, cough, headache, earache, disease of the eye, etc. A practical guru is absolutely necessary to teach pranayama. The directions given in this book are useful as subsidiary rules. Many mistakes and dangers will, however, be warded off by a strict adherence to these rules. The place, a small and solitary cell. The time, spring and autumn. The food, light and sattvika. These are some of the important preliminaries. Overexertion, fasting, etc. should be avoided. This shows clearly that hatha yoga is not to be confounded with asceticism. It is far from that. As the training of an athlete is not asceticism, so that of a hatha yogin is far from being so. True, celibacy is a necessary condition for both, but then that alone does not constitute asceticism. The directions regarding food are peculiar for the people of Bengal, the author of this treatise being apparently a Vaisnava of Bengal. For other countries and persons, these directions may not be applicable to their entirety. But animal food, intoxicating liquors, tobacco, and drugs are strictly prohibited for all climes. These are 3 parts of pranayama: puraka, or drawing in of the breath; kumbhaka, or retaining the breath; and rakata, or expelling the breath. The proportion of these should be 1-4-2, i.e., if puraka takes 12 seconds, kumbhaka should be 48 seconds, and rakaka 24 seconds. For drawing in, holding, and say breathe in for 12 seconds, hold for 48 seconds, and breathe out for 24 seconds. The beginner should proceed cautiously. Well, the ratio being kept the same, the period of retention, etc., may be increased ad infinitum. The beginner should proceed cautiously, should not increase the periods of 16, 64, 36 seconds. He should carefully note the various mental and physical changes going on in his system while practicing it. Perspiration should be wiped off with a dry towel, nor should he be afraid when he begins to feel a sort of quiver all over the body. Sometimes he may be jerked off his seat, sometimes he may involuntarily jump about the room like a frog. These should not frighten him. Sometimes there may be no physical manifestations, but mental reactions. He may hear noises, see visions, smell strange odors, or taste delightful delicacies. These are for the most part hallucinations, indicating an excited state of the nervous system. These will soon go off of themselves when not attended to, but flashes of truth will also illumine his heart now and then. Sometimes in the Siddhakasa, he may see reflected distant scenes and events. Thoughts of persons will become visible to him, and he himself may leave his body and be carried in space with incalculable velocity. All these symptoms accompany pranayama. The guru must always be near at hand to help and control, for otherwise insanity and not clairvoyance may be the outcome of all this. These are the results of higher stages of pranayama, but every person may practice this for 2 or 3 minutes and experiences beneficial results on his own body. Petty disorders like headache, stomachache, chill before fever, weariness of body and mind will vanish instantly by performing 2 or 3 kumbhakas. Some persons are born with the faculty of performing pranayama. Swedenborg was a living example of this in the West. All persons unconsciously perform pranayama when absorbed in deep thinking. The 10 vayas, 560, are the various nervous forces or currents of the human body. The various sorts of kumbhakas taught in chapter 5 do not require much elucidation. The Brahmari Kumbhaka 578, however, is a little peculiar. It leads one to hear the various sounds called anahata. These sounds are said to be caused within the body by the rushing of the blood through the arteries and veins. The fixings of mind on these sounds soon produces trance. Dhyana and samadhi are purely mental processes. Fixity and one-pointedness of attention produce trance. The experiments of hypnotism prove this. To fix the mind on one idea produces exaltation of mental faculties. Guzipur, SCV, 7th September 1893. All right. And I'm not gonna bother doing the. I'm just gonna stick with the Instagram thing for the other chapters of my reading of Homer B. Sprague. Homer B. Sprague. Union hero extraordinaire. My meditation beads. That'd be a good way to count. Let me see.
All right. Did 3 rounds, 5, 20, and 10. So what I gather, springtime and then autumn, and then that's just the purification. Then they do it all year long. That's good because then that means summertime. I mean, that means summertime I can work. Well, it makes sense. Let's see. Because springtime, springtime. I don't have time to be drinking anyway. Because a lot of the times we spent getting planting, the springtime is the weather's melted at where I am. Because like he says, diets be different other places. So the snow's melted. There's ground's fresh. Your plants are growing. You get but it takes, well, summertime is kind of, I don't know. I'd have to ask the farmers because that's when, oh yeah, you have to harvest. If you live around dry weather, you gotta get your crops harvested because then then they turn. Then after you harvest, you just kind of like burn the fields or very light things when it gets real hot. So that'd be a good time to sit around and drink and do drugs again. So yeah, pretty what yeah, and then in a harvest time. Well, I guess there's another round. See, crop rotations and at the peak of the summer and the cold of the winter. Those are hard times to go outside and work. It's just this is just the way I'm thinking and justifying my own life. Oh, to be a transcendental human, to be a transcendental immortal yogic thing, transcending time and space, but then not be able to enjoy anything on this earth. Hey, well, here we are. Here we are.